Cyrus the Great is an extremely complicated and often difficult to understand archer commander, and today I'll be updating my Cyrus the Great in-depth guide. I'll go over all of his skills, I'll tell you which skills are the best for him, I'll tell you his best pairings on the open field, I'll give you his best talent tree, and finally I'll tell you if Cyrus the Great is still great in 2024. So if you're interested in Cyrus, whether or not he's a good commander or maybe just how you can get a bit more value out of him, you want to stick around to the end of the video. Now, let's start off today's video by going over some of the skills for Cyrus because they are easily the most difficult part of his kit, and of course, with any commander, they are also the most important. Starting off, we have Cyrus's active skill, and this one is one of the more complicated skills, like most of his skills, and also one of the more underwhelming parts of his kit. First of all, he deals direct damage 1,400 to a single target troop. It's a really rubbish amount of damage, especially in the current meta where we're looking at a commander releasing in a few days' time who has over 2,800 active skill damage. So Cyrus's damage really lackluster on that active skill nowadays, which is something that really does impact him. Furthermore though, for the next 3 seconds, he's going to put a debuff on the target that makes them take 20% more damage from additional damage effects. So anything that says additional damage in the text for it will count. A good example of this is Ramsey's active skill, where he's going to deal additional damage factor to a target troop over 2 seconds. So that is just an example of additional damage. It doesn't buff your normal damage factor, which a lot of people thought it does. It only buffs the additional damage. Kind of similar to the talent in the talent tree latent power, which only increases your additional damage. It doesn't affect your normal damage. It is an additional damage thing only. Cyrus's second skill here, it's just a stat skill. He gets 15% march speed and 30% attack. Kinda underwhelming in the current meta, and also, well, not really the most overpowered either. It is quite weak, the amount of attack he's getting. The march speed is still pretty decent, to be fair. The attack, though, it is kind of rubbish, and compared to definite more stronger and more meta commanders at least, it is a lot behind. Moving on to Cyrus's third skill, if he's only using archer units, which is pretty much always, whenever he launches a basic attack, he'll have a 10% chance to deal additional damage to the target of 250 factor for 3 seconds, and then he'll reduce the skill damage dealt by the target by 40% for 3 seconds, which has a cooldown of 5 seconds. So this skill, it's one of his strongest skills. This is where we get into some of the more interesting things with Cyrus. You'll notice most of his damage isn't really from the active skill. It is mainly from these additional skills, which can all stack up. And I have done a previous Cyrus guide. I think the total amount of damage you could get in 5 turns with Cyrus was like 3,800 damage factor on a single target, which is a bit ridiculous, but you need to get stupidly lucky for that, and you won't really see that happening. So Cyrus, his additional damage is nice. The fact that he's got so much instant damage does still give him a bit of value, and I'll tell you about that later, but it is definitely a little bit unreliable in some situations where you can't get that 10% chance to really trigger. Moving on to Cyrus's fourth skill, if this commander's troop is on a map, whenever he's hit by a basic attack, he's got a 10% chance to deal damage factor to 3 enemy nearby troops, and this is for a 2-second cooldown, and this will last 2 seconds and has a 5-second cooldown. So this skill, it's pretty good. It's just revenge AoE. It's not as good as some of the more modern commanders again, but the fact that there is no reduction here, usually most AoE things have a reduction of 15% per target. Cyrus does not, so he's going to deal 600 damage to 3 targets. That's 1,800 revenge damage. But it is obviously reliant on there being at least 3 targets, which they usually will be, and also he has to be getting hit. So it won't just be him attacking your opponents, you have to be hit back, so you pretty much need to be on the defensive for this to actually trigger. Finally, moving on to Cyrus's expertise, whenever he uses an active skill for the next 3 seconds, he'll get 20% attack, 20% defense, and gain an extra 50 rage per second. This is another one of the more powerful parts of his kit. The amount of stats he gets here is good after an active skill, and the rage gain is really nice, especially with some of his best pairings. It does give him a lot of value because it makes him pretty much a open field rage engine, and once you get that first active skill off, you're just going to be pumped full of rage. In terms of his best skills out of what we've seen, I mean, Cyrus just needs to be expertise nowadays. Due to his age, if you even want to run him, you have to have him at an expertise. Otherwise, you're just going to be wasting your time and wasting your resources. So Cyrus, needs to be expertise, otherwise I wouldn't even touch him. Some of his more valuable skills, if you were to work on him in a weird order, you'd probably want to look at his 4th skill. That is pretty good, the amount of revenge damage you are getting, and then probably his 3rd skill, and maybe even the 2nd. I mean, all of his skills are kind of pretty good. It's just his active skill that's kind of lackluster, but active skills are the most important. It's a bit of a catch-22. You can't get full value from Cyrus unless you do have all of his skills, and you have got him fully expertised. Moving on to the talent trees for Cyrus, I generally still go for the skill tree when I run him, purely because I don't really run him as a primary, but if I do, Cyrus is more of a skill tree commander just for the fact that you just want to get that initial rage cycle, since he just wants to pump off that active skill, give the opponent that additional damage debuff, so that hopefully he can get a bit lucky. If you get really lucky with Cyrus, especially if you are running the skill tree, you pretty much can decimate your opponent's march, and he'll be some of the stronger commanders in the game, even in the current meta. But if you get unlucky, he's garbage, and more than likely, you're going to get unlucky or normal luck compared to getting super lucky. But then again, I still just find that feral nature works the best for Cyrus, and then I just do what I normally do with my updated archer build, which is where I go up into venomous sting, all the way up into there. I put 3 out of 3 points in razor sharp, and then you're going to put no points in the archer attack, and you're going to put 1 less point in the arrows nooked, and you're going to put 3 points into latent power. That's pretty much what Cyrus would look like. I wouldn't put naked rage on Cyrus. He's too squishy. He doesn't have enough damage. But other than that, you're just going to go full skill tree, get latent power to 3 out of 3, max venomous sting, and then take 2 points out of the attack here, and take 1 point out of arrows nooked to give yourself the full Cyrus tree build, and in my opinion, that is the best Cyrus build. Moving on to the best open field pairings for Cyrus, the first one that I really, and I still currently use, is Henry V. This pair is really good in terms of its tankiness and its revenge damage. Henry, very tanky commander. Cyrus, not really so tanky. Henry, a lot of revenge damage. Cyrus, also a lot of revenge damage. So the fun part is, you can pretty much just cheese people by going in and out of your city, letting them hit you, and if Cyrus's cylinder triggers, which often if you get hit by like 10 marches, it'll insta-trigger, and Henry's skill also triggers, his 4th skill here, you're going to get a ton of just instant damage and you can run away. It's pretty much like an Alexander the Great city proc or city jump, except it's just worse. It's not as good as using Alexander the Great, because Alex is a bit easier to control and does more instant damage, but it is still very nice, and the amount of instant damage you can drop with this march is definitely pretty decent, and I still find that I get some value out of it. Not to mention, Henry V with Cyrus in general is a relatively good march on the open field, because you're damned if you hit it, since you'll get a bunch of revenge damage, and you're damned if you don't, because they're just going to drop active skill damage in you, and Cyrus has got some pretty gnarly debuffs. He's got his active skill debuff, and he's also got his 3rd skill debuff here. So it's kind of again, another annoying march to deal with. It's not the most powerful by any means, but it is not a bad march at all, and I still think it can hold some value if you do put it in your murderable as like a 4th or a 5th archer march. It's not a go-to for me. Henry definitely has stronger pairings like YSG, like Nebu, but I think Cyrus does hold some value in this situation as being a pair for Henry on the open field, and it's really good in situations where you find you're getting swarmed a lot more. Until Shajar releases, which is really soon, I think this will remain as one of the stronger, at least tankier open field marches for archers that have a bit of revenge damage and can hold their own when they get swarmed. I often find with this march, my trade is about 1 for 1. So each sev wound I'm giving, I'm taking about 1 sev wound in return, which is a good ratio, especially because I only bring it out when we're severely losing on the open field. So this march often gets the best trades when we're losing. When we're winning, not really, because I can do more damage with my other marches. But in a losing situation, Henry Cyrus definitely holds a good bit of value. Another pairing for Cyrus, and this one is a bit more outdated, this is one I used to personally run, was Boudica with Cyrus. It was one of my go-to pairings for quite a while, just because Boudica, a lot of skill damage increases she has, especially on a single target. Cyrus can have really ridiculous single target damage, not to mention the fact that Cyrus is giving your opponent a ton of debuffs, and he is quite a good rage engine, just pairs him pretty good with Boudica, especially when her debuff was a lot more valuable, even though it is still pretty good. It used to be more valuable before Smite Commanders. You kind of wanted it to be rolling, so if you had YSG locked up with someone like Nebu, and you had a Cyrus to spare, you could easily run a Boudica-Cyrus combination, and it worked really, really well, had good debuffs, and overall was pretty stat heavy. I personally don't know how it does currently. I know when I last used it, it wasn't very good. That's why Cyrus is not 100% in my murderable nowadays. So I don't think it's a go-to pairing for me. I definitely don't run it nowadays, but it can maybe still work in a tight situation. The last pairing I'll really give mention to is running a Cyrus primary and a Ramsey secondary. This used to be a really good pairing, especially when it first released. It isn't really now, unless Ramses and Cyrus both get museum relics in the future, and this video is obviously made to be a long-standing guide. Unless Ramses and Cyrus get museum relics in the future that completely shift them, which I doubt, I don't think this pairing is going to really come back to light. The reason it was so good though is because Ramses' active skill, it's additional damage, and if you run Cyrus as a primary, you're pretty much doing a Boudica prime. You're giving your opponents a damage debuff, and then your secondary commander is going to slam them with a crazy amount of single target or AoE damage. In this case, Ramses is single target. So it was at least a really good march, and similar to Boudica, Cyrus was almost like a Boudica mini. So it kind of worked out back then. Nowadays, I would pretty much say this is a horrible idea. I haven't seen this march on the field for years. I only saw it when I first invested in Cyrus. Since then, I have not once seen a Cyrus Ramses. It seems to be quite an outdated and outphased march. The last question that we should answer today is a very, very easy question. Is Cyrus still good in the current meta? Is he still a good commander? The answer is just, yeah, nah. He's not really that good, to be fully honest. I invested in him many years ago now. It's like 2 years ago. It would be around 2 years ago I began investing in him. I finished him at the start of 2023. I wouldn't even consider investing in him now. He's not even close to the top priority list. He's so far down to the point that where you actually, if you do end up getting to him, you might as well just wait for new archers or new cavs or new infantry or even new engineering commanders. Cyrus is not at that level where he's worth an investment at all. It's just not even close in any way. That being said, he does still have some facets where it can be valuable. If you're a pure archer account like mine and you have him expertise, I wouldn't go and get him expertise, but if you have him already, you can use him to city pop. If you have a Henry, you can use that march together. I find it works pretty damn well, and I definitely do have some fun running it. It often works in some open field situations where you feel that you're being overrun and you have no other archer combos, and it works if you're often getting quickly swarmed. Like someone's going to hit you and run away. Henry Cyrus is nice. It's going to give you revenge damage, pretty much gives you a chance to decimate people who do that, but it's still not as overpowered as running as Yulang with Herman. I mean, it's just much better, and even Boudica or Shabani Pal will outperform at least a Henry Cyrus in almost every situation. It's such a niche march that I only pull it out in really, really weird parts of the game or when I'm feeling very bored in KVK. It's fun to use, sure. It's not the best in the game by any means, and it's definitely, again, not one of my go-tos. So Cyrus, he isn't really there on the open field nowadays. He's He's just not that amazing. He does have a couple of good support skills, so if you do get Cyrus sculptures, I'd try and get that second skill. It is often a support skill I find in some KVKs, so you can get value out of it. In the Siege of Orleans KVK, it's pretty good. And then the fourth skill, I would try and get if you want to use that in Siege of Orleans. I haven't seen that as a support skill in a normal Heroic Anthem KVK, but in Siege of Orleans, you can use this. So if you are playing that KVK, Cyrus's fourth skill, kind of an okay pickup. But again, I wouldn't go out of my way to get it. So unless you are you already have him expertise, or maybe you got his sculptures out of something such as the Legendary Tavern, he probably wouldn't be a good pickup to get those skills in. You'd probably be better off if you had to pick some archer commanders, maybe from the Lucerne Scrolls. You'd be better off picking up someone like Edward, who is A, an older commander, but B, he's got that 30% health skill there, which is really good with the 30% march speed. It's one of the best support skills for archers in the game. Cyrus doesn't have as good support skills. His second is decent because it's got march speed, and his fourth is good for the revenge damage, but otherwise it's all around relatively average skills. His expertise, I mean, no one's going to get that unless you already have him, like an account like mine. So overall, he's more of a commander you'd only pick up to get those very niche support skills, especially if you already have someone like Edward. I think that there are, again, though, better commanders with better support skills. Artemisia's second skill is much better than Cyrus's second skill. Most commanders will just have a slightly better one. I think Gilgamesh also better. You get the 20% all damage, you get the health. Those are just better options over Cyrus, but he does have some value in that regard, and you can go and get those skills if you do have spare Cyrus sculptures or you got him from an event or two. Just upgrade those skills, they'll give you more value. Ignore the active skill, you're never going to use it if you run Cyrus, and also ignore the third skill. One last thing I will mention with Cyrus, he can be used at 1111 as a free AoE farmer, because this will trigger when you're near barbarians. And I think it's a circle AoE, it is definitely a circle AoE. So you can use this AoE skill to pretty much encapsulate a bunch of free barbarians, but the march is going to be kind of weak. So I would do this if you have higher level barbarian tech, or you've just gotten a bunch of boosts onto your marchers, because he will die at 1111. So unless you've got some good commander to back up Cyrus, Cyrus is not going to be that good for AoE farming, but he can definitely work in Home Kingdom and in the early parts of the KVK, since you can pull in a bunch of barbarians for free if you just have him unlocked. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, I just want to tell you guys that I'll be doing my Shajar live stream on Tuesday. She's going to be fully released into the game. I plan to instantly expertise her, I plan to max her day 1, and I might get a bit of testing in as well. I'll also be doing the first face reveal on my channel. I have a webcam literally sitting on my computer. By the way, that was the Cyrus Barbarian proc right there. I've got a webcam sitting up, it's fully set up, I know how it kind of works. So we're going to try and do a face reveal on the Shajar live stream. Not to mention, it's going to be a speed run to expertise her as fast as possible, and I'll give you some first impressions. So if you want to see Shajar fully expertise live the minute she releases, my channel is going to be the best one. The link for the stream will be in the pinned comment and also in the description, so trust me, it's a stream you guys don't want to miss out. Definitely put it down in your camera, set an alarm, whatever you got to do, because you do not want to miss that stream. Now, I just want to say thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.